A long time ago, in the big thicket of East Texas, there lived an old man in a log cabin all by himself. He cut and fit every log for that cabin all by himself. He collected and placed every stone in the fireplace all by himself. And when he was hungry, he'd go out hunting all day long, all by himself. Now, if he caught anything, he'd bring it home and cook it right there on the fireplace. But if he didn't catch anything, he'd make himself a big old pot of beans. One fine evening, the old man was sitting in his rocking chair cooking up some beans. He was rocking back and forth, casting in and out, not paying much attention to what was going on. And every half hour, he'd reach over and give those beans a stir. And then he saw something move in the corner of the cabin, over where there was a hole in the floor. He'd always meant to get that hole patched up, but he never got around to it. Something was sticking its head up through that hole. It was the ugliest thing he'd ever seen. It had little old beady red eyes and long pointy ears and teeth that looked like they ain't never seen a Colgate toothbrush. The old man thought to himself, if that thing comes in here, I'm gonna cut it. And you know what? It did. It came in and it circled the room once, it circled the room twice. Third time around, the old man picked up his hatchet and threw it. And it cut that thing's tail clean off. Well, that thing scampered back through the hole in the floor. It ran across the yard into the pasture, across the pasture into the woods, making the most awful sound you ever heard. Yee gummy, yee, yee, yee. When the old man couldn't hear that thing anymore, he turned back to the room and saw the tail wiggling back and forth on the floor. He picked it up, and he had the idea to maybe hang it on the wall as a sort of hunting decoration. Y'all know how some men are about their hunting decorations. But the old man hadn't had any meat for a while, and that tail started looking mighty tasty. So he chopped it up and put it in with the beans. When it was ready, he scooped himself a big old bowl full and ate it up. And when that was gone, he scooped himself another bowl and ate that too. And then he got out yesterday's cornbread and he sopped up the juice. Cleaner than it was when I started, he said. He put the pot back in the pantry just the way it was. An hour or so later, the old man started to get a tummy ache, so he decided to go off to bed a little early. There's a big old feather bed in the corner of the room. He fell back onto it and pulled the quilts up to his neck, the quilt his mama made for him a long time ago, and he went off sound asleep. A couple hours later, he heard a scritching sound on the wall outside the cabin, and then he heard a voice. Tailypo, Tailypo, I want my Tailypo. Well, that scared the old man. He kept some dogs under the porch and he called them out one by one. I know, you know, Contico Calico. He called them that because that's what their names were. Get out after that thing. And they did. They chased that thing across the yard and into the pasture, across the pasture and into the woods, howling all the way. Ow, ow, ow! And that thing was making the most awful sound you ever heard. Yee gummy, yee, yee, yee. When the old man couldn't hear that thing or those dogs anymore, he waited. But only 2 dogs ever came back. The old man put a bar over the door just for safety. He fell back onto that feather bed and pulled the quilts up to his neck. The quilt his mama made for him a long time ago. And he went off sound asleep. But it wasn't long before he heard it again. A scritching sound up over the window. And then he heard the voice. Tailypo, Tailypo, I want my Tailypo. And that scared the old man. He called his dogs out again. You know, Contico Calico, get out after that thing. And they did. They chased that thing across the yard and into the pasture, across the pasture and into the woods, howling all the way. Ow, ow, ow! And that thing was making the most awful sound you ever heard. Yee gum, yee, yee, yee. When the old man couldn't hear that thing or those dogs anymore, he waited. But only 1 dog ever came back. The old man put another bar over the door just for safety. He fell back onto that feather bed and pulled the quilts up to his neck, the quilt his mama made for him a long time ago. And he went off sound asleep, but it wasn't long before he heard it again, a scritching sound at the door. And then he heard the voice. Tailypo, Tailypo, I'll get my Tailypo. Well, that scared the old man son awful. He called his dog out. Contico Calico, get out after that thing. And it did. It chased that thing across the yard into the pasture, across the pasture into the woods, howling all the way, ow, ow, ow! And that thing was making the most awful sound you ever heard. Yee, get 'em, yee, get 'em, yee, yee, yee. When the old man couldn't hear that thing or that dog anymore, well, he waited. And he waited. But that dog never came back. The old man didn't know what to do first. He built a big old fire in the fireplace so nothing could come down the chimney. He closed the windows and he shut the shutters. He pulled the quilts off the bed, the quilts his mama made for him a long time ago. He rolled it up into a ball and shoved it deep in the hole in the floor. Then he went and got a rock he kept there in the cabin. Y'all never know when you might need a rock. And he put that on top of the quilt. The old man should have felt safe and secure, but he didn't. He picked up his hatchet and spent the rest of the night just walking, swinging, and thinking. Thinking, swinging, and walking. He knew that if he could just stay up till daylight, he could deal with that thing. When the old man thought he'd stayed up long enough, he went and looked through a crack in the wall. He could see some sunlight out there, so he carefully opened the shutters. That sun came in and felt so warm and so good. The old man opened up the window and let the breeze on in. Oh, he felt so relaxed and comfortable. He fell back onto that feather bed and he said, I'm going to get a good night's sleep if I have to take it in the daytime. But you know what happened? There, on the foot of the bed, was that thing. It had come in through the open window. It looked at the old man and it said, Tailypo, Tailypo, I want my Tailypo. Well, the old man said, if you want your darn Tailypo, you ought to come and get it. And you know what? It did. Now, folks, if y'all went into the big thicket tonight and looked for that log cabin, y'all wouldn't find it. It's long gone. But if the moon is out and the breeze is blowing, y'all might find that fireplace. And if you go stand by that fireplace long about 10 o'clock tonight, stand there in the moonlight and listen, you'll hear it. After a while, you can make out the words. Tailypo, Tailypo, I got my Tailypo. And that's the story of the East Texas Tailypo.